Hello everyone. Today's video is going to be on theories of. Sorry, I've just ran up the stairs, so I'm really knackered. Theories of romantic relationships. So probably the dullest bullet point in the relationship section. It is a bit mundane. We're probably looking at 4 theories today, and I've got the spec up to show you. So we have this bullet point just here that we are looking at. We need to look at the social exchange theory. We need to look at equity theory, Rusbult's investment model commitment, including satisfaction and comparison with alternatives in investment. And then we need to look at Duck's theory of relationship breakdown. So not only do you have to be able to describe those theories, you need to also be able to compare and evaluate those theories as well. So a 16 marker in this is probably likely to happen in the next couple of years. And you kind of need to know all 4 theories. So we better make a start. Whilst this is a relatively dull part of the spec, I actually remember it being really, really interesting to look at university level. I find the maintenance of long-term relationships fascinating. Most of us have long-term relationships, maybe not romantic relationships, but we do all have, long-term relationships. Why? What is it that keeps that relationship going? Like specifically, psychologically, what is it that keeps it going? So, these are the 3 main theories, right? So I should point out and say that these are the 3 theories of romantic relationships. Duck's theory is not why we stay together, but what happens when the relationship breaks apart. And we're going to cover all 4 of those. The first thing we're going to be looking at is the social exchange theory. Now, one thing you're going to know from all 3 or 4 of these theories is that psychology's take on relationships is a little bit robotic in the sense of it doesn't take into account love. It doesn't think that is that abstract concept is worth investigating or examining. Instead, and the social exchange theory really sums this up, it kind of all 3 theories kind of state that relationships are maintained purely because they benefit the individual, not the couple. They benefit each individual separately. So the social exchange theory, as it says, is the basic premise that individuals feel they are getting more out of the relationship than they are putting in. And I'm going to be referring to your romantic relationship, should you have them. Those of you who are actually in a romantic relationship, with 1 or 2 people, maybe a throuple, I don't know, you're only in that relationship because you're getting more out than you're putting in. And this applies to literally every single human behavior, or the 99.9% of human behavior. We do it because we get more out of it than we put in, right? It benefits us more than it costs us. And that is why relationships are maintained. Now, you may say that's a little bit heartless, and you'd be right. But that is why we are together, because we get more out of the relationship than we put in. And long-term relationships will involve partners continually and giving and receiving items of value. But if this stops, or if it becomes imbalanced, that relationship is likely going to fail in the long term. Sorry, I think I can hear Bella crying. Ultimately, this is a big evaluation point. It says that humans are selfish. We are only in relationships for ourselves. And I may play devil's advocate a lot during this screencast because I enjoy it. But that's a good evaluation to pick up on and say, actually, psychology views humans in quite a negative light, I think. So the theory is based upon costs and benefits. And what I would ask you is, subjectively, what to you is a benefit and what to you is a cost. So a massive thing here is that costs and benefits are entirely subjective. It's down to the perception of the person. A cost for me may not be a cost for you, for example. So let me think. I'm trying to think of perceived costs and benefits in mine own relationship. I'll come on with that in a second. But housework, for example, is it fair? Well, we'll get onto fairness in a second, but let's just assume this: is it fair that one individual cleans and tidies the house significantly more than the other? The tidy the individual will feel that they're putting in more effort, and therefore it isn't fair to them. Now, fairness is more to do with equity, so we'll come on to fairness later on. But the premise remains is that you are. I had a mate. If we're reading this just here, I had a mate of 20 years. 20 years we were mates, longer than you've been alive. We went through school together. I was his best man. We were always there for him. And for 20 years, my relationship with this guy, my friendship with this guy, benefited me more than it cost me. But it did get to a point where he started being a bad friend. Circumstances changed. He got divorced after 2 months. That's a whole story by itself. And to be honest, he just became a bad mate. Now, within, I'd say about 6 months, we'd stopped being friends with him because he started to cost us more than he benefited. Let me ask you, why would you do anything that costs you more than it benefits you? And I'm gonna take a stab in the dark and say most of you have got friends at the moment who actually cost you more than they benefit you. They annoy you more than it's worth. That long term, that relationship is going to die. That friendship is going to die. So costs can include, but are not limited to, taking care of someone emotionally. That can be quite tiring a lot of the time if people are oversensitive, if they're crying a lot when actually, really, realistically, there isn't any need for them to cry. A lacking sex life or a partner who is inherently jealous. All of these are costs, but you need to weigh them up against the benefits. So as I said, it's a cognitive theory, the social exchange. Why is it a cognitive theory? Because it's to do with the perceptions of costs and benefits, not the actual costs and benefits. So, for example, and not to be cliche here, but this is just the first one that comes to mind. Right? Me and Candy probably cooks. Well, Candy does cook for me more than I cook for her, but I think she's a very good cook. I think she has this natural talent to be able to go into a cupboard and just rustle up something I can't do. I think she's a good cook. But the key word there is think. Right, that's a benefit. I perceive that to be a benefit. But she may not actually be a good cook. Like, realistically, she may not be. Maybe I've just had awful food beforehand, and now I think she's a good cook when actually she isn't. So it is more the perception of costs or benefits, not the actual costs and benefits, that are actually the most important. And it all comes down to maximizing your benefits and minimizing your costs. And this is very important. This is called the mini-max strategy. You minimize the costs and you maximize the benefits. If you want to maintain your long-term romantic relationship, all you have to do is maximize your benefits and minimize your costs. Without doing so, your relationship is going to die. It is going to die. All relationships require maintenance. Do not fall for that teenage fallacy that people have where they get to a point of being with someone for maybe a year and they think their relationship is self-maintaining. It isn't. You have to constantly work at it, and you do that by maximizing your profits and minimizing your costs. Now, this is what it's all about. Let's say that this here is your actual relationship. You can see the costs on the left-hand side and the benefits. Now, what you would argue here is the costs are not actually that much more than the benefits. Sorry, the benefits are not that much more than the costs. What you do need to know is the gap between them is called the profit. That's really important, by the way. The bigger the profit, the more attractive the relationship. That is what it is all about. You may see some things where it says the social exchange theory is about equality. That is partially true, but what the social exchange theory is really about is the bigger profit. Now look at this relationship. OMG. That's a very nice relationship. Someone who benefits you more than your current partner, and yet they have no costs whatsoever. Yes, please. And what we're going to come to in a second is, do you... Now, I'm slightly playing devil's advocate here, although I'm not really, to be honest. Those of you in a romantic relationship, this is your current boyfriend, girlfriend, partner, friend, right? Are you seriously telling me that if this person comes along in your life, you're not going to drop this person? You're not going to, even if this person is interested in you and clearly wants a relationship with you, you will leave this person very, very quickly. And if you're going to turn around to me, but I love them. No, you won't, because you will love them. You will love these people even more. Now I'm saying that semi-aggressively, but that is psychology's viewpoint on it. So it's about the bigger profit. Look at that profit. Look at that gap, right? If you want to remain in your relationship, you have to widen your profit. You have to increase your profit. And to do that, you minimize the costs. You stop being a shit partner and you maximize your benefits. You start being a good partner. So the bottom graph is way more attractive to us. And profit is essentially benefit minus cost. Right? If this calculation comes out in the negative, i.e. you have more cost than benefits, that will lead to a slow dying of the relationship. And I've seen this happen many, many times in my life. Now, on that, we've looked at profit. Quite important. What I'm about to go through is not, and please note this down, what I'm about to go through is not limited to social exchange theory. All of the theories we look at today involve the comparison level and the comparison level for alternative relationships. So let's start with the first one. And again, there are some voice notes here. The comparison level is basically your comparison on the current relationship. So what you do is you take your current relationship and you compare it to previous relationships you've had. And we all do this. We all do this. 100% we do. Even if we lie to ourselves and say we don't, we all compare our current relationship to previous relationships, because why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? And what we also do, by the way, which is still the comparison level, is we compare our current relationship to what the relationship used to be like. Is it better? Is it still the same? Is it worse? So this is something we do cognitively in our heads. We may speak out loud, but whatever. The other thing we also do, and this is the bit where people get a little bit arsey sometimes, is we conduct what's called a comparison level for alternative relationships. We are always, either consciously or unconsciously, looking out for other relationships because we want to get a better deal. We want this relationship, not this relationship. And if there's a better deal out there for us, we are going to take it. Now, I know a lot of students get really offended at that. I'm just telling you what psychology's point of view is here. But the truth is, and this is the analogy I say to students a lot of the time, if you go to buy an iPad in the Apple store and it's 300 quid, you take it to the till, and as the cashier scans it through, it says, oh, it's not 300 quid, it's 200 quid. You can have it for 200 quid. Nobody here is going to say, no thanks, I'll take the worst deal. I'll pay 300 because that's what is advertised at. Nobody is going to do that. So if you transfer that analogy to relationship, if someone comes along with a better deal, psychology says you're going to conduct a comparison level for alternative relationships. And if you deem this new potential relationship to have greater profit, you are going to take that deal. You're going to drop your partner, and you're also going to. Now, this does explain cheating somewhat. It does explain cheating. If people want to try out the new relationship to see if it is actually as good as it looks from the outside, but they don't want to leave their current partner because nobody wants to be alone, that does actually explain why people cheat. I'm not saying it accepts it. I'm not saying it condones it, but that it does actually explain that relationship. So this theory goes further. And you need to know what Rusbult and Kelly said about the 4-stage model of a social exchange theory. And these are the 4 stages that people go through when they start to figure out how much that your partner costs you and how much it benefits you. When me and Candy first started going out, we didn't know each other's costs and benefits. We absolutely do know that now because we've gone through this stage. So the first stage before you're in a relationship really is the rewards and costs are assessed in a number of relationships. Now, what's important here is if you're not in the relationship, you don't actually know what the costs and benefits are. You only have to perceive them from the outside. Okay, yes, he looks like he might be a bit of a psychopath. Yes, she looks like she's quite possessive. Yes, he looks like he's quite a jealous person, or actually he's quite rich, or maybe she's quite rich, for example. So your rewards and costs are assessed from outside of the relationship, but they may be wrong. Do you know what I mean? So you may misperceive them. Now you get into a relationship with someone and you go through into bargaining. So bargaining is basically when a relationship is costed out and you do an initial, sorry, there's a lot of football scores going on now. Cost-benefit analysis. So you look at the sex life, for example. Is that a cost or is it a benefit? You look at the emotional care. You look at generosity, kindness, humor, all this sort of thing. And you start costing out. Now, over time, you enter the commitment stage. Now, this is... Rusbult and Kelly didn't put an actual time on this, but the rewards and costs slowly become predictable as the relationship enters new stages. So you start to, based on previous behavior, know what to expect from your partner. Is your partner going to buy you flowers? Is your partner going to be there for you when you need help, for example, emotionally? Is your partner going to be there to, give you a shoulder massage at the end of a really tough day, for example? You only find these costs and benefit out over time before eventually going into institutionalization, which is a hilarious name for a relationship, which is when interactions become entirely predictable and the couple settles down. Now, you're not going to get this straight away. This sort of realization of cost and benefit does take time to find out. Now, there's 2 pieces of research here that you probably do need to know. None of these are named in the spec, but Hatfield is finding that partners who under-benefit in a relationship feel angry and deprived, whereas those who over-benefit, which does happen, they feel guilty and uncomfortable, which suggests you do need an element of equality here. You don't want one person benefiting too much from the relationship whilst one person isn't benefiting. And then you've got Rusbult and Martz. Again, pause the screen if you want to write this down, but I would know at least these 2 pieces of research. In terms of evaluations, this is quite a negative theory, obviously. It says that humans are selfish. It doesn't consider love. Therefore, it's quite socially sensitive and therefore quite offensive, and therefore people may not pay that much attention to it. A good thing about the social exchange theory is that, and this is a good point to use, it acted as the foundation for successive theories to build upon. So whilst the social exchange theory doesn't explain everything in human relationships, it acted as a foundation for more research, instigated more interest, for example, and it formed the basis of what we're going to look at later on, the equity theory. The theory doesn't necessarily explain behaviors by those individuals who do not seek to be in a relationship, which some of you don't want to be in a relationship. So how is this? I mean, you could argue, I guess, that maybe you think a relationship will be too costly for you, but theory doesn't exactly really do well. There is also social penetration theory, and there is a link there. It's a good thing to be able to compare the set to the social penetration theory. Now, there is a model answer just here. Again, I don't think students are particularly very good at elaborating on practical application points. In fact, I think they're terrible, to be honest with you. So this might be a good thing to be able to actually do to try wrap your head around how to expand upon a practical application point. So we'll move on to the next theory, which is essentially the equity theory. So the equity theory is a modified version, and it's all based upon fairness, not equality, right? So again, I don't want to go into this in too much, but basically it's based upon fairness. So let me tell you a brief story. I'll keep it quite quick. Girlfriend, I don't know, about 10 years ago, I had, just when I was becoming a teacher. I was earning 21,000. She had just qualified as a nurse, working nights, and she was earning 29,000. So I was earning 21,000, she was earning 29,000. In terms of the rent, we had an £800 rent, and we paid it £400 each. That isn't fair. It's equal. It's equal. We're both paying £400 each, but it's not fair. So sometimes in a relationship, equality is not fair. And this is what the equality theory is based upon. So the theory is based around the idea of fairness in relationships. And when individuals become dissatisfied with the relationship, they probably are feeling like they are suffering from some sort of unfairness. Relationships where people feel they put more in than they receive, or receive more than they put in, is considered inequitable. And here's an important, this second part of this is quite an important part. Those who recognize there is a disparity actually do have a chance to improve the fairness of the relationship. So it's not as if you break up out of nowhere. You think, oh my God, my relationship's unfair, I need to break up with them. Couples have chances to save the fairness in the relationship. So, not going to go through that. Before we go into this, I probably work somewhere between 60 to 80 hours a week, I would say. I tend to work between 60 to 80 hours a week. 80 hours a week is roughly speaking 15 hours a day. 60 hours a week, between 50 and 60 for most weeks, but it can go up in the busy ones. Girlfriends I've been with before have worked, Candy works, for example, let's say 40 weeks. Therefore, I can't contribute as much at home because I have less hours at home. So it wouldn't be fair for me and Candy to do equal amounts of housework. It just wouldn't be fair because my time I'd spend more time at work, for example. If it was fair, I would feel like I was getting a bad deal. If I came home after working 80 hours a week and I still had to do the same housework, that wouldn't be fair. And I would start feeling quite angry about this. I'd be, well, hold on a second, I work harder. And I'd feel like I'm under-benefiting. So if we have a look at both these partners, these are two partners this time, according to the social exchange theory, which we looked at, these are both in profit. So the relationship will continue, but it's not fair. One person is clearly getting more than the other, right? One person is clearly getting more than the other. In this case, partner one is massively over-benefiting, is hugely over-benefiting. And you might think that's really good, but there are issues to being the one who over-benefits. You feel guilty because you know for a fact your partner gets a shitter deal than you do. And those of you in a relationship, I just want to think, is one of you better off in the relationship? Do you know what I mean? Like, it is, for example, If your partner earns a hell of a lot more than you, maybe they work full time, but you pay everything equally, like when you go out for meals, your partner's massively over benefiting. But they will feel guilty because they know deep down that they're getting a good deal and that you could leave them. So under benefiting is generally worse. Nobody wants to be under benefiting. Nobody wants to be over benefiting, but it's not as bad as under benefiting. So the equity theory is that it's improbable, it's impossible actually, that a relationship is going to be fair the whole time. You're going to have periods of inequity when one of you gets a new job, for example, when one of you starts to work harder, when one of you, maybe loses your job, or maybe one of you goes off pregnant and therefore can't work. There's going to be periods of inequity your whole relationship. And Worcester said that actually equity is based upon 4 principles. Now, the first one is profit. Where have we seen profit before? Social exchange theory. This is where the social exchange theory was built up upon, right? So you're going to see the influences of profit here. So profit is rewards maximize cost benefits. The other thing that is actually quite important for equity is distribution. So trade-offs and compensations. This does happen in relationships. I love this, by the way. I always love this psychology. Trade-offs and compensations are negotiated in a relationship to achieve fairness in the relationship. So when you move in with your partner, you will have a sit down and a talk about how much you're going to contribute and how much they're going to contribute. And it's either going to be equal or it's going to be fair. So there is always this trade-off and compensations, even if you're not living with your partner. Dissatisfaction is another thing that influences equity, and the greater the degree of perceived unfairness, the greater sense of dissatisfaction before realignment, which is possible to achieve with fairness. Basically, if restoring equity is possible, maintenance will continue and attempts will be made to improve the fairness. Now, you need to know these 4 factors, these 4 principles of equity. This should go into your AO1. As always, there are 2 pieces of research you do need to know. They're not named in the spec, so all you need to know is what they found, but you need to make it identifiable. So write the name in, for example, 219 participants, 6 different cultures. You need to make what you write about identifiable to Dainton or Yum et al. Let's just appreciate that name. Before we have some evaluations here, are there cultural preferences on whether you prefer equality or equity? Yes. Moghaddam found that actually US students prefer equity, European students prefer equality. Now, this is generally not what I find with most students. This is generally not what I find. Most students actually do prefer equity in my own personal experience, but research is showing that actually there is a cultural difference. Finally, we will get to, and there's a model pillar as well for equity theory. Sorry, it's a long day. Finally, we will get to Rusbult's investment model of commitment. Now, this builds upon even further the set and equity theory. But Carol Rusbult, she unfortunately died quite young, actually. I think in her 40s, Carol Rusbult. It's a she, by the way. People always say he, and it really winds me up. #feminism. This theory works on the notion that if you invest in something, you are more likely going to put more effort into it than walk away. If I want to start getting healthy, one of the best things I can do is spend a ton of money on running gear and trainers and etc., because I've invested in it. It's much harder to, I'll say this now, it is much harder to walk away from things that you've invested a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort in. So it is rarer for people married for 20 years to get divorced than people married after 1 year, for example, because people who are married for 20 years have put a lot of effort in. They've got kids, for example, they find it harder to walk away than people who don't have kids and haven't put that effort in. There is always a little part, and I don't know if this is harsh, but there is always, when I break up with someone, there is always a little part to me when I break up with them. I've been with them a couple of years. Little part of me is just like, well, that was a waste of my time. Right, all that investment I put into that relationship, just poof, gone. Right. Imagine if you did that for 20 years of marriage. Now, you might turn around and say, well, people do get divorced after 20 years of marriage. Yeah, you are right. And there's a big evaluation here. So, this is what we are looking at. These are the 3 factors that you need to know that all impact the degree to which you are committed to that person, and therefore the degree in which the relationship will survive. So we kind of know all these already. Satisfaction, quality of alternatives, we covered this. This is stuff we've covered already. Satisfaction level, things like profit, quality of alternatives, comparison with alternatives, before finally taking into account your investment size. So let's have a look at this, right? We've covered this quite a lot already. This builds upon the previous 2 theories. So these are 3 things that influence your commitment. The last one is your investment size. So how many resources have you put in? The longer the relationship continues, the longer and the more you have invested into this, and it's harder to walk away. You're closer to their family. You've invested money into this relationship, for example. It's quite difficult to walk away. Sorry. It's quite difficult to walk away. So these 3 things build upon the previous theories. These are 2 things that these are 2 variables that influence commitment. So that is different, by the way, to these 3 cause commitment. These three, if satisfaction is high, comparison with alternatives are low, investment is high, that's going to cause commitment. But these 2 are variables which also can influence commitment, particularly social support, the degree to which your friends and family agree with your relationship. If they do agree, you are much more likely going to continue that relationship. Now, a couple of things which I've added to this quite recently. There's 2 types of motivation in terms of commitment. So you have intrinsic investments. That should say intrinsic and extrinsic investments rather than motivation. I'm thinking of something else there. So these are intrinsic investments. So these are things that we have put into the relationship, right? So time, effort, money, emotional care. These are things we've put into, hence intrinsic. Extrinsic are things that have come out of the relationship that we must be committed to. So children is the big one. Shared memories and interweaved friendships. Please note that what is found actually to really be a strong indicator of relationship success is how interweaved your lives are. If you keep separate lives, that relationship statistically is probably not going to survive too well. You need to be able to interweave the friendships. Just going to pause for 2 seconds to see something. 1 second. So, moving on. Where were we? Come on. These are also some maintenance mechanisms that you can also outline in your AO1. These are things that we do in order to like behaviors we do in order to increase the commitment to someone. So positive illusions. We are unrealistically positive about our partner's qualities, which makes me laugh. We ridicule alternatives, so we will try to dampen the advantages of a potential alternative partner. We try to look at them in a worse light than they are in order to try to keep us in this relationship. It doesn't always work, obviously, people do cheat, but these are 5 things you can also write about in your AO1. 2 pieces of research again. So there's 6 pieces of research for these 3 theories. One thing just to note is that Rusbult actually did a lot of the research that backs up Rusbult's theory. Investigative bias there, for example. But feel free to pause that. And there's a couple of evaluations here which I think would be quite useful. So yes, it does have face validity, doesn't it? On the face of it, it makes sense that the more you invest into something, the more committed you are. But it doesn't explain why people stay in abusive relationships. So you could have a really, really bad profit margin in your relationship. In fact, you could be in negative territory. Your relationship costs you more than it benefits you because your partner is abusive. Yet, sorry, I'm thinking of social exchange theory, which doesn't explain abusive relationships. Rusbult does explain abusive relationships because it's quite, as I say, it's quite difficult to walk away with things that you've invested quite a lot in. If your partner becomes abusive after, say, 5-10 years, that's even harder to walk away from because you have put a lot of relationship and you may have kids in the relationship, and that's why I hate the term battered women. I don't know why. I don't know why I don't like the term, but that's why there is a problem, particularly with battered women who go to shelters and then they end up going back to their partner. And it's quite a common behaviour that happens because they feel very, very reluctant to walk away from a relationship that they've poured so much effort into, which is understandable, really. Okay, and there's a model pill for this one here as well. Now, not going to go through that. Now, those are the three main theories, right? Usually, I would stop there, to be perfectly honest with you. But I am going to actually go through the fourth bullet point, which is actually part of this. I'm going to go through relationship breakdown. I'm going to go through relationship breakdown. Why do relationships break down? Well, we've spent quite a long time looking at why they stay together. Now we need to actually look at why they break down. The only thing you actually need to know here, to be honest, is the stages. So we're looking at relationship breakdown, and it's actually quite nice to be an expert in what I teach and from a personal point of view for once. So there are three. You know what? Actually, I'm going to just stick to the main thing you need to know. In the lesson, I will teach all this in a bit more detail. I'm a bit wary of time, though. This you're not going to get a question on, but it's useful to know. You also, I'm not going to get a question on this. What you specifically need to know is the stage model that Duck came up with. So Duck came up with a 5-stage model that we go through when a relationship is breaking down. Now, I've done this many, many times. I've been in relationships that have broke down like literally out of the blue. I've woken up that day and thought, well, my relationship's still going. This is brilliant. And then before the end of the day, I've broken up with them, or I've been in relationships where, everyone has seen the writing on the wall for a long period of time. So you can go through these stages very quickly, or you can go through them quite slowly. But let's make a start. These are the 4. I will add the 5th just there. So we've got the intrapsychic stage. So intra meaning within, psychic meaning kind of thinking, thought processes, so on and so forth. So this is one partner privately begins to feel dissatisfaction with the relationship and has the dilemma about whether to actually tell the other person. Dyadic is when they do tell the other person, right? So a lot of you in your relationships will be constantly here, because there's something that pisses you off about your partner that you're not actually raising to them. Dyadic is when you discuss these dissatisfactions with your partner, and then if nothing happens, you break up. And the breakup happens between stages 2 and 3. That's something you do need to know. You need to know when the actual relationship breakdown happens between 2 and 3. Now, stage 3 is social. This is when the breakdown has happened and you have to go through that horrible stage of telling everybody about it. And negotiations will occur at this point. Who stays in the house? Who gets the kids? Who gets the car, for example? And these are more immediate ones. Grave dressing is my personal favourite. Where post-relationship perceptions are created. We come up with our own stories as to why the relationship broke down. And unsurprisingly, we don't tend to blame ourselves. Even if we were the ones who cheated on that partner, we don't really blame ourselves. We blame the other partner. And then finally, a fifth stage was added by Duck later on, which I think should be called the Phoenix stage, but he called it the resurrection stage. Reconfiguring oneself for future relationships, people will start to do new behaviors and gear themselves and change themselves and gear towards future relationships. So you do need to know a bit of detail for all of these. I do have some ones just here, which I'm not going to go into too much detail about, but intrapsychic, you focus on the partner's behavior, you focus on the negative aspects of the relationship. Why are you in this relationship, for example? You look at what the individual gets from the relationships in terms of benefits, so on and so forth. So this is all within you. This is all within you. If you decide that this is too big a thing to sit on, and I can't keep quiet about this, you will go to the dyadic stage where you're going to confront your partner over their perceived inadequacies. You're going to say, can you not do this in future, please? Because it's really starting to wind me up. And they will, or they won't, attempt to repair the problems. So one thing my teacher once said to me about this was a relationship will start to break down if one partner goes, look, this is annoying me, can you fix it? And the other person's like, no, I'm not going to do it. I don't have the energy. I don't have the motivation to do it. And as soon as that happens, the relationship is as good as dead, really. And both will assess the cost of withdrawing from the relationship. If coming out of the relationship is deemed to be more beneficial than costly, you're going to enter the social stage, and this is always a tricky balance. This is someone who is socially inept may not be good at this stage, to be honest, but it's a tightrope. So you want to negotiate your post-relationship dynamic with your partner if you're still living together, which often happens, by the way. If you break up with someone, they don't just move out, they have nowhere to go. It takes time. So in the days afterwards, you may be living with a partner who you've just broken up with. You're going to have to negotiate quite a lot there. And it's a lot worse if it's been a tumultuous, toxic breakup. You have to deal with gossip or fuel the gossip in your friendship or family circles. And face-saving stories are created in the case of a breakup. So we don't tend to blame ourselves. And then finally, grave dressing, performing getting over activities. Interpret that as you will, and we will publicly distribute our own version of the breakup, which typically, by the way, Duck said, is more interesting than what actually happened. So research, a couple of pieces of research there as well. Again, know this. This is one area I think that hasn't had too many questions before. So you do need to be aware of this. And in terms of evaluations, a great thing about this is everything I have talked about on this blue and white PowerPoint, can easily be applied successfully to friendships. Grave dressing, dyadic, dissatisfaction, intrapsychic, all of these things can actually be applied. So it has good generalizability and applicability. It has fantastic applicability. It's not universal, though, you would argue. Surely there are some relationships that have not followed this 4-stage theory. Remember, the whole point about all of this, by the way, is that this happens in order for every single relationship. Surely that's not happened for every single relationship. Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. So that is pretty much it. There's not a lot that you need to know for Duck's relationship breakdown, but you need to know the 4 stages, the research and the evaluations, and I will go through the rest at a time in lesson. Hope this is useful. Peace out and all that.